Today we're meeting again with Fred Riley of Riley Individual, Family and Marriage Counseling. And what are we going to be talking about today?
So today what we're going to be talking about is reunification or repairing a relationship with those that you may be considering separating or divorcing from.
Why should somebody even try to save a marriage that's been on the rocks for a while? And whether that be many weeks, months, or years, why should somebody still try to hang in there?
That's a great question. I think that a lot of people wonder why they should hang on to a relationship. And I think a good reason to take a look at that, number one, is children. You certainly don't want to stay in a relationship for the children, but taking a look at, okay, is there something that we can salvage here? Do we look at the children? Is there something we can do as a couple for the children? But probably the most important reason why you'd want to stay in a relationship or look at repairing a relationship is you want to be able to say, hey, we've taken a good, long, hard look at this. We've looked at our differences. We've taken an opportunity to learn about each other and learn about each other's differences to see if we can make it work. And in the end, to say, hey, you know what, to yourself, I've been able to take a look at this and do all the things I can within reason to make this work.
You know, I've said the same thing, and I as a divorce attorney, have said, you know, I don't like to see people divorce. I know that may come as a surprise to many people, but I really don't like to help in a divorce situation until I know there's really nothing left to do. So I will tell people at the beginning, make sure there's no wondering what might have been. Make sure you say to yourself, look, I know that this is an irretrievable situation. I know that I need to get divorced because it's going to be difficult and you will have regrets. Even when you needed to get divorced, you're going to feel like, I do miss certain aspects of my marriage that no longer exists.
Correct. Oftentimes when we make that decision, from an emotional reasoning place. So what we talk about is looking at this from an intellectual aspect of things. And so a lot of times we get caught up in the hurt and the anger and maybe betrayal and those types of things. And so we can use what's called emotional reasoning versus intellectual reasoning.
That's a good point. So we're not going to cover everything in
Correct.
a short period of time.
Correct.
Let's talk about the first few things that you think are most important or that you've got to establish first. And we can have the other parts for another subject for a different podcast.
Definitely. So Eric and I have been talking a little bit about how can we repair a relationship or how can one work on repairing a relationship. And there's 5 steps. I'll just mention those really quick, but then we'll talk about the first 3. So what we want to do is we want to evaluate 5 different areas. One would be our knowledge base of the individual that we're working on that relationship with. The second would be the trust level that we have of that person based on knowledge base, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Then also our level of commitment, the extent to which we can rely upon that person, and then finally what we call touch or intimacy. And that breaks off into 5 different areas of intimacy, but the areas we're going to focus on today would be primarily the knowledge base, our trust of that knowledge base, and then also the extent to which we commit to that person.
Okay. Knowledge base, what's that?
Sure. So knowledge base, essentially a knowledge base is that mental image we have of that person. As you get into a disagreement or as someone shows up late, our knowledge base kicks in. That's our brain trying to tell us, okay, what are we about to see here? And so by the time that you're looking at divorce, your knowledge base usually has some pretty not so fun images of that person, okay, where we're saying to ourselves, oh, I know he's with that person, or he's at the bar, or I bet she's doing this. That's that knowledge base that we're referring to. And so that knowledge base kind of guides everything that we do. As we're waiting for that person to come home, or as we're trying to make a decision, our knowledge base tries to help us predict what's about to happen. Okay? So what we look at based on knowledge base, or following knowledge base, is our trust level. So often what happens is our trust level needs to be no greater than our knowledge base. And so what happens is we over-trust somebody. Okay, in order to feel like we're giving that person the benefit of the doubt, we might ignore our knowledge base. Okay, when we work on repairing a relationship, a therapist or a counselor, what they do is they try to help you and your spouse understand, okay, how your behavior appears in the other person's knowledge base. In other words, they're going to have a limited trust of you.
It seems like, as you're talking about knowledge base,
Yeah.
that, pardon me, you were talking about, like, well, I'll bet he's at the bar, or I'll bet she's over. You need to make sure that what you know is what's factual.
Correct.
Right? So your knowledge base cannot be based on things that you just suspect. That's
Correct.
not knowledge. And even though you may be absolutely certain, if it's not true, then you're working from faulty information, and you're going to have a faulty understanding of your relationship.
Correct. Correct. Unfortunately, what happens with that, though, is our spouse gets upset and says, you know what, I can't believe you think of me that way. The idea, though, behind the knowledge base is that comes from somewhere. And so repairing the relationship, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I bet that the reason you're looking at me that way is because I gave you something that would indicate that.
And what about those situations where, I know this happens a lot, I see this when talking to both the women and the men on both sides of a relationship, whether it be a divorce or a child custody dispute, where somebody's saying, like, I know why you are this way. And the other person says, you know, sometimes that's correct. It's like, I know you have a porn problem. It's like, yeah, that's true, I have a porn problem, and now we can work on that. But other times it's, I know that you're a porn addict. And it's like, I'm not. I swear to you, I'm not. I mean, I'm not looking at pornography. Or I know that you're borderline personality disorder.
Right.
No, it's like, look, I get it, and if I had troubles, you know, I'll go to a doctor and I'll get diagnosed. That's not me. So how do you, and even on a lower level, I mean, things like you're not disciplined enough. You know, you lack self-discipline. It's like, well, I may not be, you know, the most disciplined person in the world, but I'm certainly no flake. How do you start with that? How do you help both sides have a clear understanding of one another? What really matters?
Okay, good question. So a lot of times we have to kind of differentiate there, because a lot of times we're giving someone reason through past experience to kind of see those things. And sometimes, unfortunately, we have to evaluate, is that coming from some of your own experience or some of your own what we call fears or doubts, okay, where maybe a spouse isn't acting that way, but, you know, like with pornography addiction or anything like that. However, we have our own stuff that's kind of kicking in there, and we talk about in our offices fear and doubt, okay, because you don't want to be hurt by that person. You don't want to be let down. And so therapy can help evaluate, okay, what are those, where are those fears, those doubts, those concerns coming from? And more importantly, I think, Eric, we have to help the spouse. That's another point of argument. We have to have the spouse say, okay, although I didn't give those things to you, like those fears, okay, I'm going to respect those fears where they're at. I'm going to respect that concern that you have, because it comes from somewhere. Okay? And so often what happens is we're looking for who's wrong. We're looking for leverage.
Well, that's not fair, Fred. I mean, you know, if you've got these fears, I didn't create those fears. I shouldn't have to live with that. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, great question. I didn't create those fears. The idea is that when we acknowledge is probably the best word, acknowledge that those fears are there, okay, we create a dynamic where it's safe to feel. We create a dynamic where someone can raise their concerns, where their knowledge base for whatever reason is kicking in, and they learn to trust that we're going to allow those fears to be there. We're going to talk them through. What that does is it actually argues against that person's knowledge base. It says, hey, take a look at this. I know you fear I'm going to get angry with you. However, I'm showing you that I'm not. Therefore, you're kind of dispelling that vision or that view that they have just by responding, listening, and hearing what they have to say.
That's cool. That's kind of an aha moment there. Sure. Now, what if you're dealing with somebody who is afraid and doubting and they're crazy?
Okay.
Can you work on that relationship, or should you just kind of say, you know, I know you have fears, but they're irrational, crazy fears, and can you work on a relationship in that situation?
That's a great question, and actually that's very difficult, because the person that would have that craziness, those deeply embedded fears, oftentimes what we would suggest is, hey, go with that person. to invite them to take a look at those things. But a lot of times what happens is that doubles back and they say, I know what you're doing. You're trying to go get some type of information or leverage to show in therapy that I'm crazy. Okay, so those are difficult situations. But again, you go back to, okay, you know what? All I can do is invite that person to participate. I can't change their fear. I can acknowledge their fear. I can say, listen, I can see that you're worried that I think you're crazy, or that your fears are out of line. But something I guess you can do that I do as a therapist is I'd say to that spouse, listen, we're all worried, we're all crazy, I guess, for a reason. Okay, so let's take a look at that. There's validity to that, and I'm willing to take a look at that with you. The problem with that is you have to really put your emotions in check in order to do that. That's a pretty hard thing to do.
So getting back to the trust idea, that you're actually helping to build trust by helping to discount some of that knowledge the person thinks he or she has.
Right.
Like, I know you're afraid of these things, and I acknowledge that, and I think that's important to note that, like, just because you may not believe there's any basis for the fear, that doesn't really matter at this point. You're just saying, I understand you have a fear. Correct. You have a fear of me abandoning you, like your dad did your mom. Or you have a fear that I'm into porn or drugs, or that I like to hang out with the boys more than I like to hang out with you, or whatever that is.
Right.
It's not that you're saying whether it's right or wrong. It's like, I'm acknowledging that.
Correct.
And then we're building trust simply, the only way, but simply by acknowledging that, people realize, oh, okay, so you understand and you respect my fear, and you're not doing the very things. Now that I know that you're aware of it, I can more clearly see, hey, you're not doing those things. Maybe I need to reconsider. Maybe I can trust you, even though I still have these fears.
Right.
I can see that you're not going to be one of those that brings my fears to fruition.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Now, with that, going back to this idea of knowledge and trust, so often we do something like Eric just mentioned, where we stay with that person, we acknowledge them, their fears, we acknowledge the things we've done in the past in terms of mistakes or errors. In other words, we're confirming their knowledge base. Oftentimes what happens is we get excited. We say, see, look, I just listened to you, I just acknowledged, and then we find nothing happens. We have to remember that trust is based on predictability, or another word for trust is predictability. So your spouse, or anybody for that matter, has all these kind of virtual or tally marks, okay? And what I see so often in my office is, okay, I just did this great big thing. Okay, but that great big thing doesn't push away or clear out that knowledge base completely, because it's about predictability. Okay, I've got all these negative tally marks over here, and this guy or this gal thinks they can change that with one big thing. Okay, and so the idea is now we're looking at consistency. Okay, where we're consistently sitting down and acknowledging. Okay.
So be prepared for this to take some time.
Yeah, sure. It takes some time. However, the neat thing is, I've never seen, if we were to go back to tally marks, I've never seen that there has to be a complete, tally mark for tally mark. What happens with that consistency, we find that trust, we have a natural tendency to want to trust. So we start to get some momentum and say, okay, this is different than what I thought.
And remember your own knowledge base, too. I mean, that's some time. If you're thinking, time, when I think of taking some time, that takes years. It may take years, but that could mean it could take months.
Correct.
So don't let your own fears and doubts cloud what your understanding of what we're talking about is today.
Yeah, excellent. So as you're listening to this, for example, like Eric said, your fears or doubt might say, well, wow, that could take forever. I've seen these things turn out very quickly because we want to be understood and our spouse wants to be understood. And there's some energy that builds up there with, okay, this is where we started a long time ago, however many years ago that was. It's familiar. We get excited about having that back again, and we start to see that level of investment go back up.
I think it's interesting how you're pointing this out. So you have to have your knowledge base by figuring out, by seeing that there's a knowledge base.
Right.
And you can naturally build on trust, which has to occur.
Right.
And then as we're building trust, we have to be consistent.
Correct.
So let's talk about the consistency prong some more.
Okay. So consistency, really, you have to have yourself, this is about self-awareness. And, I think this could be kind of difficult, but or feel difficult. But the idea is what we're talking about. I labeled these 5 areas where we work on. One area that kind of divides all this is self-awareness. Okay, am I doing those things to be consistent? Am I being aware of my own knowledge base? Okay, what things bother me? What things trigger me? And then also just making kind of a conscious effort to say, okay, listen, I'm going to be more mindful, more aware of this person. Again, going back to the why, if anything, to be able to say, okay, I've tried things a little bit differently. I'm trying to be more, they say I'm not in tune with their needs. I'm going to spend more time trying to be in tune with their needs. And in so doing, we can help adjust that knowledge base.
And are there things, which we won't go into specifically here, but I mean, that's kind of like asking someone to start learning to play the piano, isn't it?
Right.
Being that like, well, aren't I good enough as it is? I mean, do I have to spend more time focusing on this? I mean, I'm the kind of guy, I can say that if somebody told me that I need to be more mindful, or if I need to be less sarcastic or something like that, that would take real effort. It's not that I wouldn't want to get better at something. I mean, if somebody told me I can learn to play the guitar in 6 months, rudimentary guitar playing, I might say, well, that's great.
Right.
I don't know if I'd be able to do it. I don't know if I have the interest or the will, so I assume that a therapist can help people kind of develop some ways to do that.
Yes. As a matter of fact, as a therapist or counselor, what we do like at our clinic is we say, you already know how to play the guitar, you just don't know it. As a matter of fact, in most of your interactions, you are mindful of people. When it comes to that significant relationship with somebody, we tend to throw those things by the wayside. So we're not reteaching or teaching guitar per se, and we may be within the relationship, okay? But the idea is we give real life examples. We take a look at your life and we look at real life examples where you have a tendency to be mindful, where you have the ability, and we're saying, okay, the ability's there, but what's getting in the way, going back to knowledge base, is your own perception of how far that might go with the other person. We're both kind of hunkered down, got our grenades ready to launch.
And just in the short time we've been talking, I mean, if the relationship is dysfunctional in some way, and I know that's a loaded term, but still, if there's problems in the relationship, I mean, something has to change.
Right.
Because there's something wrong with it.
Right.
You're changing to bring it into being normal and healthy.
Right.
So this is Dr. Eric talking at this point, but you have to understand there does need to be some change for the better. This is not something where you're changing just for the sake of change or changing just for the sake of making your life difficult.
Right.
You're going to see an improvement.
Yeah, you're going to see an improvement. And what I tell people all the time is whether or not, you're doing this for you too, whether or not it results in a better relationship, these are skills that you're going to want to have for building a future relationship. And I often find people come in and they say, and might be familiar to you too, Eric, I married my ex-husband, or I married my ex-spouse. Well, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, probably, but these are skills that people already have, okay, but when it comes to significant relationships, I offer up the notion to people that, hey, these are things that you want to get better at anyways, okay, to help you feel good about developing relationships with others, unless you're in that place, which, pardon me, we often are, where we're done with relationships, sure, okay, but once that thought or feeling is there to kind of evaluate committing to a new relationship, these are skills that are very good for you. You're going to want to have no matter what.
Well, let me ask you, because I'll be frank. I don't like the term coach, like life coach or success coach and stuff like that. But let's talk about coaching without all that baggage. One of the things that a therapist can do is, at the very least, be someone that holds people accountable. Right. Meeting with your therapist once a week or every other week or something like that, just so that you can realize, oh yeah, you know what? My consistency is slipping a little bit. I'm doing well in these areas, but I can do better. I mean,
right.
It's just to help give this relationship a chance to get better.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a good therapist shouldn't get involved in what we call triangulation, where they should be able to step out and, I let my clients know, and the other therapists that I work with, we let them know that we're an equal opportunity picker on her. we have no trouble saying whoa and reeling somebody in. And if we do that with you, we're going to do that with the spouse as well, because it's a system that's gotten into a sort of imbalance, okay, but a pattern, a routine, and we have to have somebody outside of that relationship come in and say, hey, I'm observing these things.
And so one other aspect of that
Yeah.
coaching relationship is that, I mean, we were recording this around the time of the Winter Olympics.
Right.
So you hear about, you'll see the coach holding the clipboard and with the stopwatch, and this coach is someone that's helping you to become a better athlete.
Right.
You're not a drug.
Correct.
You're not something that people get hooked on.
Right.
The idea is eventually you're going to stop doing this. I mean, you'll get old enough where you're not going to compete anymore in speed skating, but you need that for a time, and then you're going to say, look, I just don't need that anymore. I still have good habits. I'm still physically fit. In fact, I'm going to coach others myself or something like that. But you don't need... I think a lot of people worry that they're going to be stuck with therapy and that they can't survive without it. The relationship will fall apart just as soon as the therapy ends.
Right. And the idea, just like Eric is mentioning, the focus is to get, for an outside observer to say, hey, I noticed, like with speed skating or whatever, we got to adjust this posture, or when you do this actually works. Here's a good example. I find people do things that work, but they abandon them because they don't believe they're working. So a lot of times my job or another therapist's job is just to say, no, that was really clicking, that was working, and helping the other spouse identify, hey, this is a good place to speak up, and you guys can actually coach each other a little bit too by saying, no, I that felt good for me. So often what happens at the point where we're looking at divorce is we're just coaching each other from an emotional place. We've decided the other's wrong, okay, versus stepping back and saying, okay, there's value to the observations that the therapist might be making in the short term, but as a couple, we can make these observations and discuss them, and we can trust that each other is coming from a place of authenticity or being genuine. I think what we need to do is kind of bring in this third step real quick, which is commitment. And so often what happens is, a therapist needs to help people take a look at commitment, and people tend to overcommit. They're like, okay, I'm starting to trust this person. We're starting to get this, we're building up some steam here. We're really starting to get moving.
And if I may interrupt, I mean, already my knowledge base, I've come to understand that.
Right.
I know about my hope, my fears and my doubts, and now I understand about trust. Well, great.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna jump in with both feet, right?
Right, exactly.
It's encouraging, so it's not a bad thing. It's just you got to see it for what it is.
Right. It's not a bad thing. We get excited, but kind of contrary to what people might think, we tend to commit in order to hope to keep that going. What we talk about is, there's a reason why you hesitate to commit. Okay, as that knowledge base increases, for example, that, hey, my spouse will listen to me or they will acknowledge me, then our trust starts to go up. But really, the best way to, I want to try to illustrate this, but it's kind of hard without a drawing board. We use a lot of drawing boards. But if you look at it, our trust, okay, shouldn't be any higher than what we know. Okay, so if we're trusting more than what we know, we're likely to get hurt. Subsequently, if we commit to more than what we trust, then we risk getting hurt too. So what we talk about is giving each other, your spouse, new information in their knowledge base. And as that knowledge base increases with more positive experiences, then we can allow our trust to go up. And as our trust goes up, then we can allow our level of commitment to go up. But it's okay to be hesitant. You're hesitant for a reason. Okay? And it's okay for your spouse to be hesitant because you gave them a lot of stuff not to trust. Okay? So as we start and try these new things, as we talk about communication in different ways, as we acknowledge in ways that we haven't done before, as we change behaviors, okay, we have to be mindful that our spouse, it's not really fair for their commitment, for us to expect their commitment level to shoot through the ceiling. That's not respectful of where they've been. Okay? And so we're building a stronger relationship by letting those things grow. Okay?
So commitment is not a jumping out of an airplane to go parachuting.
Correct.
It's more of a, I'm going to cut back on fats and
Right.
sweets.
Right.
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 This is going to take some time. I'm not going to cut everything out or just jump in with both feet.
Right. We might be committed in certain areas to certain things, like our level of commitment might go up to husband picking the kids up. In the past, our knowledge base says he wouldn't show up to pick them up, or trust of the way they use devices in the home or something. So commitment, we're not talking about jumping with both feet in. We're married till death do us part or whatever again. We're just saying, okay, commitment in certain areas can go up, and then the overall kind of global commitment tends to grow as well.
All right. Well, Fred, for those of us that don't know you, would you just give us the name of your practice and your contact information?
Sure, appreciate it. So again, I'm Fred Riley. We have a clinic out in South Jordan, Utah. We're just off of I-15 there on 104th. And the name of our clinic is Riley Individual, Family, and Marriage Counseling. And we have a few counselors there to serve you and serve others in the community. And as always, Eric, we appreciate this opportunity to spend some time with you.
Great. And what's the number to call?
Pardon me, I appreciate that. Our number, you can give Lisa a call. She's our office manager. You can call her at 801-657-0163. You can also find us online at gettingback2life.com. That's gettingback2life.com.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.